In 1972, Tacoma, Washington's McChord Air Force Base was witness to an amazing incident. Not only did aliens disembark from a ship and inspect the base's equipment, not only did they defy guards and defy military police, but there was also a shootout and an engagement with the aliens that left one military policeman injured. Or was it all the product of the imagination, the very well-refined imagination of a certain infamous disinformation agent? Well, let's find out. McChord Air Force Base near Tacoma, Washington, back in 1972, contained a Tactical Air Navigation System, or TACAN, and maybe still does. This story was relayed by an agent from the AFOSI, the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, which is tasked with maintaining security and stability around bases and investigating threats to those bases. He claims his supervisor, who worked out of Groom Lake, was specifically tasked to come down and investigate this incident, and he told it to him years later. So here's how the story goes. In 1972, two technicians drove to the TACAN facility for maintenance. Upon arrival, they both opened the gate and went inside. The building was about 12 feet by 16, so it wasn't too big. While inside, they heard a strange sound coming from outside. One went out and discovered a large flying saucer, in his own words, landing on tripod legs, after spending a while hovering outside. The second technician, alerted by him, came outside and saw the same thing. Both saw the saucer land in front of the building, in a clearing within a fence area. One went outside and called the base police, and told the dispatcher a flying saucer had landed at their location. As he was calling them, two entities in silver suits, with bright gold helmets, came down from the saucer via a ramp. Both entities walked into the building, right past the two technicians, without interacting with them. Both technicians remained deathly still, and the entities somehow walked right through them. The technicians didn't know how, there wasn't enough room, but somehow they walked past, right through. The building, as I said, was 12 by 16. Not big, full of equipment, such as radios and electronics, and one of the technicians watched the two move around the building, looking at the equipment, not damaging it, but rather curious about it. They then exited and walked to the rear of the building. The technicians by this point had locked themselves in, feeling like discretion was the better part of valor here, and not wanting to be involved with these entities in any way. 17 minutes later, the security police arrived. The two security police left their patrol vehicle and looked at the saucer, then looked briefly inside it, wondering if it was some kind of Air Force experimental vehicle. But they didn't go in, and they didn't see anything else, beyond seeing the saucer on its tripods. At first, the technicians then came out and pointed to the rear of the building, mentioning that was where the entities had gone. A second patrol of two men arrived, including a soldier with a dog. The dog immediately ran to the rear of the building and began barking. The soldier followed and saw the two beings, standing behind the building. The security police challenged the beings and ordered them to surrender, but the beings couldn't understand anything and didn't respond either. They continued to move toward the saucer and the patrol dog attacked one of them, but the entity pointed a tube-like device at the dog, and the dog immediately became cowed and retreated. Another entity at this point emerged from the saucer at the same time, because even though the dog had retreated, it had not retreated before tearing the sleeve of the being's uniform and clearly injuring it. And both the entities now tried to carry the injured one back onto the craft, the injured one having fallen to the ground. One of the military policemen, not really very well advised, pulled out his pistol and fired several rounds at the entities, knocking down another one of them, just as several more soldiers arrived. The injured entities pulled themselves back into the saucer, but it didn't take off yet. Meanwhile, confusion ensued. What should they do about this incident? A senior officer arrived and ordered the guards to disable the craft in some way. They tried shooting an M16 into the bottom of it while it was still opened, but eventually a beam of light came out of the side, striking one of the army MPs, causing the rest to retreat, and then the craft took off and sped toward the west. Two F-106 fighter jets from the base flew an intercept mission as the craft flew away, but they didn't manage to catch it, and soon it, allegedly, after shooting off toward Olympia National Forest, climbed into the atmosphere and was gone. The injured military policeman was sent to an army hospital and was found to have burns on his left arm and left side from the beam, and doctors couldn't determine how they were formed, but surmised it could have been a laser. Speaking with the MP later, the AFOSI agent, supervisor who later told this to his friend, said the MP told him he was immobilised and couldn't move for a while. And the military dog was actually found to have similar burns to the soldier, and nobody could work out how they were formed. Inevitably, a debate began to ensue. Why did these entities come here? What did they want? They just walked straight up in full view of the humans, indicating they had no fear of the humans. They didn't steal any equipment, they didn't break any equipment in the room, they just walked around the equipment where the TACAN was located and looked at it all. Had they somehow detected this signal and had they come to investigate what it was? Did they envy some of this technology and want it for themselves? That part's unlikely since they had such advanced technology of their own, but either way, we'll never know. But what we do know is that this story is suspect because it comes from Richard Doty. For those of you who don't know, in 1979, near Kirtland Air Force Base in New Mexico, lived a scientist called Paul Bennewitz. Paul Bennewitz was a communications expert. He sold parts to the military. He had Thunder Scientific Laboratories, his own company, and he began to track strange lights in the sky coming from the base. They would lift up from the ground with what looked like people around them before they lifted up. They would perform amazing aerial features. They would zip here, they would zip there. And encouraged by Richard Doty and the AFOSI, he began to assume, and indeed believe, that these were alien UFOs. He began to research them, communicate with them by hexadecimal code. He believed he was receiving alien messages. He believed the aliens were talking to him. He received, quote, photos and videos and reception from the aliens, and he started to believe that they were located under Dulce, New Mexico, in a secret underground base. He researched this endlessly. He petitioned the government. Certain portions of the government were suspiciously keen to work with him, others were absolutely reluctant. The pressure eventually destroyed Paul, and he ended up in a mental health asylum. And it later emerged that Rick Doty and team had supplied Paul Bennewitz with disinformation. They'd flown him over Arcolata Mesa near Dulce, and they'd positioned fake vents atop the mountain there and fake military positions to make it look like a base indeed existed there. They'd beamed him false things onto his computer. All the alien communications came from the government. They totally destroyed him, and Doty has mentioned many other operations like this, such as using disabled or deformed people and dressing them up to look like aliens to throw other people off the scent, such as breaking into people's houses and planting bugs. And he's also told a suspiciously similar story to this one before. Check it out.
One of the creatures produced a long cylinder from its suit. The creature moved towards the technicians with the cylinder, attempting, the technicians thought, to give this cylinder to the technicians. Fearing that the object might be radioactive or a weapon, the technicians refused to accept the cylinder. One of the creatures made a hand motion indicating for the technicians to enter the craft, motioning towards the craft in a gesture that the technicians thought meant for them to walk inside the craft. At this point, the technicians radioed to the command center to send help to their location. 2 Air Force military policemen arrived, both carrying a handgun and rifle. The standard weapons worn by Air Force security police personnel or military police was a .38 revolver, 6-shot, and an M16 rifle, which contained a magazine with normally 20 rounds in it. And what the military policemen were trying to do was challenge the creatures, which would be typical of military police. Identify yourself, keep your hands in the air, things like that. But the creatures didn't seem to understand anything that the MPs were doing or saying. One of the creatures walked to the senior MP and attempted to grab his arm. The MP pulled away aggressively. This appeared to scare the creatures. Now, you have to put yourself in the military policeman's shoes. These creatures weren't human looking. This happened in a very classified area. These MPs are highly trained to protect Air Force resources, especially top secret resources. So they were on their probably highest state of alert. And these creatures, non-humans, couldn't understand anything that these military police were saying or trying to do. One of the MPs pointed his rifle, an M16 rifle, at the creature and motioned for it to come with him, moving the rifle in a manner which meant, "You come with me." The creature didn't understand. Both creatures then returned to their craft. Panel closed and the craft took off towards the southwest. The creatures left the cylinder on the ground. Now, here we are in a situation where there was a confrontation between U.S. military personnel and extraterrestrials.
So we've got, in this story, aliens firing a beam for their craft. In another story, we've got aliens pointing a Google Translate-like device, like a tube. In the other story, we've got two entities. In this story, we've got two entities, then a third entity. We've got a suspicious breach of the base. We've got aliens walking around in full view of people with absolutely no warning. Aliens in helmets, suits, and visors. These stories are very, very similar, and he's told multiple stories like this before. He's told this story about the aliens who root through the equipment. He's told the Ellsworth Air Force Base story about an alien shootout. It reads as follows. Helping Hand security violation, covered wagon security violation site Lima 9, 68th SMSQ area, 7 miles southwest of Nisland SD. At 20:59 hours, 16 November 77, A1C Phillips, Samuel A. Lima Security Control, telephoned WSC and reported an OZ alarm activation at L9, and that Lima Sat 1, A1C Jenkins and A1C Reiki were dispatched. Trip 62, ETA 21:35 hours. At 21:47 hours, A1C Phillips telephoned WSC and reported that the situation at L9 had been upgraded to a covered wagon, per request of Captain Stokes. Larry D., FSO. Security Option 2 was activated by WSC and Base CSC. Backup Security Force 1672 was formed. At 23:40 hours, 16 November 77, the following information was learned. Upon arrival at 21:32 hours at Site L9, Jenkins and Reiki dismounted the SAT vehicle to make a check of the site security fence. At this time, Reiki observed a bright light, shining vertically upwards from the rear of the fence line at L9. There was a small hill approximately 50 yards behind L9. Jenkins stayed with the SAT vehicle, and Reiki proceeded to the source of the light to investigate. As Reiki approached the crest of the hill, he observed an individual, dressed in a glowing green metallic uniform and wearing a helmet with visor. Reiki immediately challenged the individual. However, the individual refused to stop and kept walking toward the rear fence line of L9. Reiki aimed his M16 rifle at the intruder and ordered him to stop. The intruder turned towards Reiki and aimed an object at Reiki, which emitted a brief flash of intense light. The flash of light struck Reiki's M16 rifle, disintegrating the weapon and causing second and third degree burns to Reiki's hands. Reiki immediately took cover and concealment and radioed the situation to Jenkins, who in turn radioed a 1013 distress to Lima Control. Jenkins responded to Reiki's position and carried Reiki back to the SAT vehicle. Jenkins then returned to the rear fence line to stand guard. Jenkins observed two intruders, dressed in the same uniforms, walk through the rear fence line of L9. Jenkins challenged the two individuals, but they refused to stop. Jenkins aimed and fired 2 rounds from his M16 rifle. 1 bullet struck one intruder in the back, and 1 bullet struck the other intruder in the helmet. Both intruders fell to the ground. However, approximately 15 seconds later, they both returned to an upright position and fired several flashes of light at Jenkins. Jenkins took cover, and the light missed him. The 2 intruders returned to the east side of the hill and disappeared. Jenkins followed the 2 and observed them go into a saucer-shaped object, approximately 30 inches and 20 inches thick. The object emitted a glowing greenish light. Once the intruders were inside, the object climbed vertically upward and disappeared over the western horizon. BAF-1 arrived at the site at 23:30 hours and set up a security perimeter. Site survey teams arrived at the site at 1:20 hours and took a radiation reading, which measured from 1.9 to 2.9 roentgens. Missile maintenance examined the missile and warhead and found the nuclear component missing from the warhead. Colonel Spraker, wing commander, arrived at the site and declared the site a national defence area and ordered all non-essential personnel out of the area. All evidence found at the scene in the follow-up report will be classified by order of Colonel Spraker. Reiki was treated at base hospital by MAD Captain Sanders for second and third degree radiation burns to each hand. Reiki was air evac to an unspecified location. Reiki's M16 rifle could not be located at the site. It's so infuriating because this is such a fascinating story, but the source is Rick Doty. So what do you guys think? Do you think it's real? Do you think it's absolute and total hogwash? Were you on the base on that day? Can you confirm anything? Please write that in the comment section below. It always generates an interesting dialogue. Please drop a like on this video and leave a comment. I really appreciate it. Please leave a subscription and turn the bell notification button on. And please, around here, check out my other collection of alien deep dives and investigations. That really helps me out a ton. And thank you for watching.